What's going on, guys? It's John DeYong here, and today I want to talk to you about mentors, specifically how important they are, how much impact they have on you, and why it's essential to surround yourself with people who have walked the path before you and can guide you in the right direction. Now, this is a property channel, so we will be focusing on property mentors, but the process and the concepts still apply in many different scenarios. Firstly, I'll be going over what defines a mentor and the reasoning behind having one. And then we'll be looking at 3 specific case studies of some of my good friends that have been guests on my podcast, Smashed Avo Property. These case studies include Jack Henderson, Dilleen Daniel Walsh, who have all amassed property portfolios of around $4 million. However, have done it in 3 completely separate ways, invested in different types of assets, and although they have done all the hard work to get themselves where they are today, I'll argue that the types of assets they have invested in have been heavily influenced by their mentors. A mentor is essentially a trusted advisor. They should provide guidance, motivation, emotional support, and role modeling. They'll also help us explore different paths, help us with our goal setting, build teams around us, and provide useful resources. Mentors these days can come in many different forms, and technology has allowed a range of virtual mentors to pop into our lives through podcasts and YouTube, and once we're hooked, we binge almost every piece of content they have put out, which I hope you're doing with my content right now. But basically, we listen to them until we get to the point where we feel like we know them better than they know themselves. This is a great starting point for some, and much better than walking the path on our own. There's no excuses to get it wrong these days, as we can learn from the mentors who have walked the path before us and made the same mistakes in the past. The problem comes though when we have several virtual mentors. There's so much content out there, and everyone seems to have an opinion, especially in the property space. With multiple people's opinions, there's generally a conflict of interest or a contradicting statement to counter every argument, being pitched at us quite forcefully on social platforms. And if we're not careful, this can lead to an overconsumption and will throw us off what we thought we knew altogether. Now, I'm not a left or a right wing kind of guy. I do like to still consume a lot of content that gets published. However, I only do so because I feel adequate in my understanding of the sector as a whole and feel confident in my opinion on the assets I choose to invest in. I do, though, limit the variety of content by who it's published by. I have 3 or 4 virtual mentors I keep up to date with weekly, and this allows me to get a variety of others' opinions for me to consider without throwing me off completely. Although virtual mentors are important, today's video is focused on real life mentors and how much of an impact they can actually have. Let's go over some of the reasons why a real life mentor is essential for our own growth. Firstly, they provide information and knowledge based on first-hand experience. Using this, they'll often see where we need to improve, or we might be making a mistake that we're not fully aware of. Mentors find ways to stimulate our personal and professional growth. We all go through waves of ups and downs in the cycle. A mentor keeps us on track and encourages us to take the next step, but also keeping us disciplined enough by setting those boundaries and how far we do actually step out. As I said before, our mentors should be a trusted advisor. We should be able to bounce ideas off them and know that we are getting unbiased opinions back. They are also great connectors and generally can place other people in our lives, which should help us grow and develop our board of advisors to help us achieve our goals. Now, you may be thinking, well, what does a mentor get out of all of this? Why would they do all of this for me for free? However, mentorship is mutually beneficial and personally rewarding for both parties. Mentors take a pride and are honored to be a part of your journey, and there's a great sense of fulfillment through helping others. I do want to reinforce here that these 3 individuals have worked extremely hard to get where they are. In no means am I suggesting that their mentors have done the work for them. All I'm trying to point out is they have had a serious impact on their asset selection and the style of their portfolio. Also, if you're loving this content, make sure you smash that like button. Kicking off with Jack Henderson, his property mentor is Chris Gray. Chris started investing in property when he was 22 and retired at the age of 31. Since then, he has built a property portfolio of $15 million, and his philosophy has always been, put simply and in my own words, invest in affluent areas where high-paid working-class families will always be able to afford their rent. You can see from his website the recent purchases he has bought with his clients and the types of assets he would consider investing in. These are all extremely affluent areas such as Vaucluse, Coogee, Bondi Beach, etc. The lower end bottoming out at around $800K and the top end going past $2.5 million. Jack went to a charity event where Chris was offering a one-on-one mentorship package and spent something like $1,500 just to sit down with Chris for an hour. We can see how much of an impact this has had on Jack if we look at his portfolio when he came onto the podcast. He said that his $4 million was spread across only 3 assets. all of which have been secured in the same sorts of affluent locations Chris buys in.
It's on that journey of education. I come by a guy by the name of Chris Gray. I'm not sure if you've seen or heard of him before. And his story really resonated with me in the terms of it's pretty sexy. So I guess I got attached to his strategy. And then the more research I'd done, the more I'd seen that the more most affluent and wealthy people in the world use this strategy.
Our next investor is Eddie Dilleen, which at the time of coming onto the podcast, he had 16 properties at the age of 28, sitting around that $4 to $5 million total portfolio value. Since then, I think he's hit his goal of 20 properties at 28, but I'm basing this discussion on what he told us on Smashed Avo Property. Eddie's mentor is Nathan Birch. Nathan retired at the age of 24 and now owns over 200 properties, with a net worth of $30 million according to his website, which, if you do the math, his average property value is somewhere around $150,000. And this has been Nathan's game plan from the get-go. He's invested in lower-end properties in lower socio-economic areas, as he believes it's much easier for a $100,000 property to double to $200,000 than a $1 million property to double to $2 million.
Edward Dilleen has amassed an impressive portfolio worth more than $1.2 million. He joins us now with his mentor and fellow investor Nathan Birch. Boys, good to see you this morning.
Good morning.
Eddie,
Hey guys.
You bought your first home, you're 19 years old. How'd you do it?
For me, it was a lot of saving, basically. It was having a plan in place and just being committed to that.
That video is from 2016, and as you can see, Nathan has had an impact on Eddie from a young age, and impacted on the types of assets Eddie invested in. If we divide that $4 million portfolio value by 16 properties, his average asset value is around $250,000. Our third and final investor we'll be looking at is Daniel Walsh. Daniel's portfolio is worth $4 million and he's currently running on a 50% LVR. And I think that's a much better analysis than how many properties he actually has. I think he does have at least 5 properties, but he didn't actually go into that exact number on the podcast. It might have even been 9, but don't quote me on that. And his mentor, though, was Margaret Lomas.
In the early days was Margaret Lomas as well. So she was, I guess, very influential back in those days where she did a lot of in terms of the research and all that type of stuff. So she more so got me to understand more broader markets. So to look outside your backyard, to actually start looking interstate, to understand that you've got to build a diverse portfolio, to just not be looking at one state or one market, and that you've got to really view Australia as individual markets.
Margaret Lomas is pretty much the property mentor godmother. A lot of my virtual mentors had Margaret as their mentor when they were building out their portfolios, and it goes to show how much of an impact she has had on the property investment space. Margaret has recently talked about having 40 properties in her portfolio, but I couldn't track down an exact figure. Regardless, talking to Daniel about the impact she's had on him, he says that she's provided a more rounded and balanced portfolio approach compared to a heavy cash flow or a heavy capital growth approach, which has helped him maintain that portfolio while paying down his debt over time. So not only is a mentor essential to kickstart our journey, help us to avoid some mistakes, and encourage us to be the best that we can be, they also have a significant influence on the types of assets we invest in to build out our portfolios. This is why choosing a mentor is so critical, but also having other virtual mentors will give us a second or third perspective to reinforce their methods. Looking at the examples of mentors in this video, if we compare Chris's portfolio of 10 properties at $15 million and Nathan's portfolio of 200 properties at $30 million, some commentators would much prefer a portfolio of double the size at $30 million, and others would much rather just have 10 great tenants rather than 200 tenants that are bound to contain some bad eggs in, and they're a headache to deal with. So as you can see, there's lots of property commentators, including myself, who all have their own opinions that usually contradict each other. And when you're starting off, it's very confusing to try and listen to everyone at once and come up with your own strategy. This is why it's so important to understand why you want to invest in the first place, which I would recommend watching this video up here to determine. One thing I have noticed that most commentators agree on is diversification. I'm not putting all of your eggs in one basket. If we only hold onto one type of asset in one area and that market crashed, then our eggs would be damaged. So whether it be through location, asset selection, or even price ranges, diversity will aid in the impact of a falling market. Another very common agreement is the sit and hold strategy. Because trading property here in Australia is so expensive, usually 5% of the purchase price to buy and 3% of the sale price to sell, we can't just hold a property overnight, flip it and make money the next day. We have to let capital growth compound over time to see that real wealth accumulate. Given the overconsumption of content, I think this is a much better approach. Understand the common theories that all mentors agree on. Understand your why and your goals for investing, and choose a handful of mentors to follow that align with them. Speaking of, if you already have one, who is your property mentor and why? Leave them down in the comment section below. As always, seek your own professional financial, legal, taxation, and property investing advice for your current situation. These videos are just my opinion and are general in nature and should never be considered as personal advice. If you're keen for more content, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification button so you don't miss a video. And until next time, happy house hunting.